G'day guys, what's cracking? It's Ralph here, and today I want to talk to you about the Nikon Z5 that I've been using for 6 months now. And I think there's 16 things that you need to know about this camera as you're considering whether it's worth the investment. Now, I'm not going to repeat the other information that I've had on my other Z5 videos. You'll be able to catch them at the end of this video. But 6 months of using this camera, and I know there's a bunch of you out there that are still exploring about whether this camera is for you. And so this video is for you to hopefully answer and put at ease any of the questions you might have about this camera. If you'd like to subscribe here, please do. Go nuts. Yeah, just go for it. Little subscribe button. Boom. All right, here we go. Let's jump in. Let's talk about the articulating screen. Now, it's not fully articulating. It doesn't spin around the side so you can see it, but I use it a lot when you're shooting down like this, you're looking like this, or you're holding it up high and you want some action like that. Also, if the screen's like this, sometimes the reflection comes and it obscures what you're trying to see. And so the fact that you can just move it around and tilt it a little bit becomes really, really helpful. And also, because there's no top LCD, all the information is displayed on this. So sometimes you just want to look at your info, and you do that by you can just flick it out, and really quickly, depending on where the camera is and your angle, you can make it work for you so you can access your information really quickly. The fact that it hasn't got a top LCD screen annoys me more than I thought it would. Now, I know for some of you there's neither here nor there, but for me, I realized that on my Z6 I use it a lot. I use it to check the settings of what the settings are on the camera. I also use it for the battery capacity and to see how many photos are left and space is left on my SD card when I'm using it. So that's been a little bit of a hindrance. Plus, when you have the when it just displays on the back screen or through the electronic viewfinder, it takes up more battery. So you use more battery looking at this screen than you do looking at just the top LCD. So a bit of a challenge there. You can change it over to EVF, but then you have to look in your EVF every time you want to check out those settings. Plus, at night or in a dark setting, if you have all your settings and you need to look at them on this, it illuminates you like a Christmas tree. Yep, you are glowing in front of everyone, especially when you're taking astro and you're like, don't need extra light, it might ruin somebody else's shot. So that's a real challenge, and it takes extra time and convenience to do it, whereas previously you just all the info's right there. Twin SD card slots, love SD cards. I use Extreme Pro, and this can either, you can back up or you can roll on. And so depending on what sort of shoot you have, you might want to roll all the way through, like two 256 gig cards, or you might be doing a really special shoot where you need a backup SD cards for the win. This camera comes with IBIS, which isn't one of those bin chickens. Nope, it's in-body image stabilization. And that basically means there's an internal, what's called a gyroscope or a gimbal, which operates kind of independent of how you shake. Now, it's a 5-axis gimbal or 5-axis gyroscope, so it works like this, like this, like this, like this, and like this. There you go, I think I've got all 5. And it just makes a big difference. So it becomes much easier to take a shot having IBIS, and here, especially if you have vibration reduction on your lens, of which the native lens doesn't come with, but that's okay. Now, we've said this before, it shoots 4.5 frames a second as opposed to the Z6, which I think is 11 frames a second. And the challenge with 4.5 frames a second is you can lose 6.5 frames a second because you just didn't capture what you want. Now, that's a lot of editing. It's a lot of photos in one shot. However, what I've discovered is I won't take this into situations where I know I'm going to need more frames per second. So if I'm shooting surf or I'm shooting wildlife, I just won't take this camera. So if surf or wildlife is your thing, or sports is your thing, then you may want to seriously consider whether 4.5 frames a second is. However, if you know your subject and you know the predictability of your subject, you can get away with 4.5 frames a second because that's still 4.5 photos a second. Woo! Now let me interject. On a previous video I talked about this little green light that comes on when you're doing long exposures, and especially if it's night and it makes everything green. It's called a focus assist button, and I didn't know how to turn it off. I know how to turn it off now. You go to A12 on the custom menu on the Nikon and you'll find it there, and you can just turn it off, or you can keep it on if that's something you want to do. Now if you're enjoying this so far, consider joining the channel. You can join just by hitting it down there. There's a bit of an explain video. You don't commit when you hit the button. You can hit the button, have a look, see what it means, see if it's for you, see if if it's something you'd like to do, you can give me a thumbs up, give it some love, ask a question, comment, cheer me on, like, woo, love this, don't like this, got this wrong, whatever you want. Anyway, let's keep going. It has focus peaking on the manual. So when you put your lens to manual, it all of a sudden glows red, everything that's focused. Now, you could have it on, say, an aperture of 4, and you can have a large part of your image glowing red, and it does not mean that it's all glowing red. Be careful. So it's a really good indicator. It's a helpful, like, you're in the right direction. But if you really want to make sure it's going well, you use the plus button here, and you zoom in, and then you use your focus wheel wherever it is to make sure it's pin sharp. So don't rely on focus peaking, but focus peaking is super helpful, especially if you're in a hurry, you're in a jam, or you're moving your settings really quick to take a different sort of shot. Now, one of the challenges of a new system, a new mount, is this is the Z system, and the old one was the F mounts. This is the Z mount, and the Z mount is wider, which means you can get more optics out of your lens and access more of the quality of the sensor. They're really good things, but obviously with the new range of mounts means there's less availability, and so you have less of a range of lenses to choose from, and these ones, they bite. They are expensive. Sigma, Tamron, those are the third-party lens manufacturers who we might all come to enjoy and rely on. They haven't yet caught up with the Z mount. I think Tamron are toying with the idea, but no one's committed just yet. So it's a little bit of a limitation. You can use an FTZ adapter. So let's move on to the next point. This is an FTZ adapter. It attaches to your camera and it holds the F-mount lenses the same distance from the sensor as they would be mounted on a DSLR. And here's the challenge with this, is it has this block down the bottom. Now, when I first got this, I thought this is amazing, but after using it for 6 months, it's a pain. And let me show you why. First of all, we'll stick a lens on here, and then we'll stick a camera on here. When you first get this camera, you think this is great because you can mount, use this as a mount. But to use this as a mount, you have to apply a base plate of a tripod onto it. Once you do that, you can't take the adapter off because then you have no mount for your lens. Also, usually you've got a mount on your camera and this interferes with it. If you want to put this on a gimbal, then it's just a pain. Like, I understand when we first saw it, we're like, brilliant idea, so glad you did that. And now, like, you don't use it and it gets in the way. So Nikon have been ahead of this and they've gone, well, let's develop another FTZ called the FTZ, which is F's mount 2, Z mount number 2. And the number 2 doesn't have the what is it, chunky bit on there. It has no mount, which is amazing. The problem is the price tag in US dollars is $250. Now that's come down from north of 300 where it started in Australia, where I'm from. It was like $500 a few months ago. It's now down to $350. That's a lot. It's a lot for an adapter, but at the moment, I believe at the time of shooting, it's the only auto adapter available. So there's a lot of others that do it, but they don't give you automatic function on either your aperture or your focusing, which I think is a real challenge. So hopefully time will tell and someone will come up with a cheaper solution, or Nikon, you'll just drop your price down to something that's a bit reasonable just for an adapter. You feel like you're spending half the price of a lens on an adapter. And I know it gives you access to a bunch of other things and it takes away this mount, but I'm not yet at the point where I can justify that much on that when I've already got these. I love the EVF, the electronic viewfinder, and I may have been a little bit inaccurate in a previous video where the EVF on this is the same as on the Z6 and the Z7, and it is amazing. It is clear, it is vibrant. I don't know what else you'd like from it. I love it and really, really appreciate it. Now, if you leave your camera on and it's set to either viewfinder priority or it prioritizes the viewfinder when you've got it on the screen and you put it in your camera bag, it activates the battery because it then thinks someone is holding their eye to it, and as a result of that it drains the battery. So just this morning I went out shooting with it, and 2 hours later I pulled it out of the bag. The camera was hot. I'd left it on, the camera was hot, the EVF had been on as a result, and the battery was depleted quite severely. So just be careful of that. Make sure you turn it off, because yeah, sorting that problem out is, yeah, that's user error, right? But it's user error and it's made easier because of the actual camera, so just be careful of that one. The weight and the size is fantastic. I love that my big meat sausage fingers can just grip it like that. It's the right height. It feels like a proper camera. It feels weighty. I feel the heavier it is, the more stable you can hold it and the better shot you can take. If it's light, you kind of like, it's, I don't know, there's just a weight to it that rests and nestles in your hand before you put a lens on. So I've really enjoyed that and the ergonomics of it. I love that this can really quickly do this, but it doesn't naturally come off, that your hand can not fiddle around with any buttons, but you can have access to the 2 F buttons, and your fingers can just do all the dealios up here. It's just really good. And then I even use, if I'm just shooting one-handed, I never shoot one-handed, but if I do, I just wrap the little one under there, or you can put an L bracket on the bottom and you can just have your hand tuck in, and it feels like a really beefy, if you put, say, small rigs L bracket on it, it feels like a super beefy camera with that piece of workmanship on it. Now it chews through the batteries at quite a rate. So the specs say you get 470 shots out of a single battery. That's not a lot. However, I usually, if I was just shooting normally, I get way more than 470 out of it. The problem is if you do long exposure, you use more batteries, and if you access the screen more than you need to, you use more battery life. And so I've noticed that this goes through batteries really quite quickly, and so I've found that I've needed a couple of extra. And you need to be careful when you're buying a third-party battery, because not all third-party batteries work in the Z5. Not all of them do. Some do, but not all of them do. So just be really careful with that and do your research before you jump in and have it turn up in the post and you're all pumped and you go out to shoot and your battery doesn't work because it comes up and says, "You're not allowed to put that battery in this camera." That's how I read it. It just feels a bit angry. It's probably just like, don't do that. The firmware update has improved the autofocus and it has improved the tracking, but marginally, like enough for it not to be quite as annoying or slow, but nowhere near what you would hope it would be. But the problem is the Speed 6 processor that's in this, it's in the Z6 and in the Z7, they're never going to be able to make the auto-focusing and the tracking better because of the limitations now of the processor. And so when you go to the Speed 7, they put that in the Nikon Z9, which I've yet to have a play with and probably never will. I'd love to, but anyway, but without that that processing power that makes the Z9 epic, it's about as good as it's going to get, and it's pretty good. But there will be times when you get a little bit frustrated by it, but you'll be forced into using your skill, right? And that's what photography is about. It's about accessing, using the skills that you have to do this. Let's talk video. It has an external mic output, which is terrific. It's also got a bunch of other things, but the external mic output is fantastic. It sits under these little rubber sleeves. That means you can mount a microphone on top, or you can put a wireless thing on top and you can go to a lav or any sort of other mic you want. So that's really good and essential in this day and age. It has 4K capability, which is cropped, which is a 1.7 crop. Now, just to clarify something I said in previous, I misspoke. Previously, I said it has less resolution. I didn't mean it. I said, no, that's what I said. I didn't mean it had less resolution. 4K is 4K. You just get really good quality 4K and not so good quality 4K. And this probably sits in the middle. But here's what I want to say. Some people go, it's cropped. But if you don't know it's cropped, it just is what it is. And so you turn on your video and what you're looking at is what you're looking at. And if you have a telephoto lens, you can actually zoom in or pull back so you can get quality 4K on the composition and the frame size that you want just by using your head and using the telephoto. So don't be scared off that it's cropped. It is cropped, but it is still 4K. And honestly, you buy this camera because it's a photographic camera and you might use it for a little bit of video on the side. So if you're a YouTuber like me and you want to do a bit of video with it, but mainly photography, then you'll get by. You'll more than get by. It's 4K, folks. Like, That's really good. Now, where the video does fall down is it doesn't have log recording. There's no internal log recording. The Z6 has 10-bit N-log, but this doesn't. And log means it captures more data in the shadows and more data in the highlights, so you can rescue them, but it's a greater editing thing. Now, between you and us, I don't use log. It's just too much effort and too much work for the work that I do, for the requirements people have of me, and for all my YouTube stuff. I just don't use log because the files are bigger and the issues to edit them are far more complex. Now, it is something I will get into in due course, but this camera, the Z5, does not do video in log. So just be aware, if that's what you need, then you will not get it from this camera. Whew, so we've rushed through all 16, and I hope this has helped. I hope it's cleared up some inaccuracies and some questions you might have. I hope it's filled in the gaps for you. I hope it inspires you into a greater sense of photography, whether you go with the Z5, you go with something else, or you go with a different brand entirely. You got to find the camera that works for you and use it to its maximum potential. Flog it, understand it, learn about it, engage in it, talk with others about it, but take amazing photographs, create amazing videos, and add more beauty to this world. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I've enjoyed doing this video. It's pouring with rain outside, so that's why I'm in here rather than outside doing a video. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next video. Bye. You've got to apply a to use, and here's the challenge, to use this, and here's the challenge to use this, and here's the challenge. And I may have misled people in a previous email. Not STD cards. Oh wow.